Okay everyone, so if you have been following along from my previous video, we have built this customized cloud shader inside of Houdini 20 using Karma to render our scene. And what we're going to do in this video now is we're just going to create a hero shot, and then I'm going to take you through more of these render settings, and then we're going to render it out and we're going to import it into Nuke, and then I'll just show you what I kind of do quickly to finish off my final renders. So just quickly, what I have done here is I have duplicated our cloud and just transformed it around. So when you have more objects coming in, you would just merge them in. The same goes for cameras and lights, which we will get to. So I'm just going to merge this camera that I have kind of set up here. And if we just switch over to camera 2, you'll see that we have this hero angle that we are going to render everything with. So again, if I just take this cloud out, you see what we get. So it's nice that the asset pack comes with 66 different types of VDB clouds for you, different variations. And I have just kind of duplicated the one that we already had, rotated it around, and now we have a larger cloud structure. So now that we have that, what I want to do is, let's quickly throw down, I'm just going to pause this. I'm going to take our light out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to throw down a physical sky. Now I'm just going to do this so that we have two different lights in our scene. I'm going to merge these back into our pipe here. We'll grab the dome light first. Actually, so we have our dome light that we used. For now, I'm just going to bring in the Karma physical sky. And then if we hit render on that, so now we have this Karma physical sky. And what I want to do is, let's go. I just want to get like an extra light for us to play with. So let's kill the skylight, and now we just have the sun that we are playing around with. Find like an angle of 45 is pretty good. And now the closer you get to 0, like if we go down to 5, we should get this like nice, let's enable our skylight again. It starts to become more twilightish. So the altitude is basically how high the sun is off of the horizon, and the lower you go, the closer it gets to evening time, basically. So usually around like 45 is quite nice. That's usually like daytime. I'm just going to bring up our exposure a little bit. And what I want to do, let's bring in our dome light. So we have two lights going on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disable the sky. We don't want to use the sky for this one. And then let's bring it down to say 10. So you can see that we have just a little bit of like a rim light on the other side. And for now, I'm just going to leave it like that because this is just for an explanation. And I wanted to show you, I usually use this Karma physical sun and sky for look dev. It's quite nice to be able to just swing the light around and change with the time of day. So definitely check that out. You can get some really nice results with this. So I'm just going to disconnect this, and let's go and take a look at our Karma render settings. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through all of the AOVs and final render settings that I usually use to render out my clouds. We've got this nice hero angle here, and now we can start dialing things in. So I'm just going to disable this for speed, and we are just rendering clouds here, so there is no diffuse components, there's no reflection components, and there's no refraction components. All we are worried about is the cloud, so we can just keep our volume limit at 32. I have upped this to 1920 by 1080, so it's HD, and you'll see that now it's looking at our camera. And we are using camera 2, so we just want to update that, make sure that we're using camera 2. And then our output picture is the same. it's going job, render, tutorial, and then it will call it the same file. The file name is the script, and then the name of this node, which is comma render settings. So that looks good there. Let's go into, like, we'll leave the sampling. We've set our limits. I don't really play around with camera effects. And there is some dicing and ray biases here, but I usually just keep this as default. If we go over to our image output tab, this is where all of our AOVs are coming from. So we have our beauty. We don't have any diffuse in the scene. There's no reflections or refractions, but we do have volume. So I'm going to output combined volume, direct volume, and indirect volume. And then I'll just output the albedo as well. And then here we have ray level output. So I'm going to grab the position, which is P, the world space position, and then our camera depth. There are other, you can grab the normals, but it's a volume, so the normals don't really come out correctly. For now, we'll just keep this, and then there are extra variables as well. Let's see. So if we just enable one of our extra render variables and go up top here, I'm pretty sure we can grab CryptoMats. So let's just keep CryptoMat. Let's go object name. That should be fine. And we'll just leave it as is. I do sometimes use CryptoMats, and it's really nice to just have in the background. So we'll keep it like that. Lights and emissions, the only other thing that I am going to do is I'm going to enable visible lights. But now for our lights over here, if we go to the comma section, everything is grayed out and render light geometry is off. So when I render this out, it's not going to render the HDRI behind it. If you do want the HDRI behind it, you would go here, say set or create, and then you would enable render light geometry. I think this one also has the same. If you go to light, okay, so there, render light geometry is there. So I'm going to turn this off just because I want to control the HDRI at the end, but just one thing to look out for. So we have all of the things that we want. And again, so if your HDRI is rendering the light geometry, if this is enabled, then if you have your AOV visible lights, if you have the AOV visible lights enabled, it will put that HDRI into a separate layer for you. So I'm just going to keep that enabled, but I'm going to turn this off because I don't want that. And then everything else is pretty much the same. I don't use any denoises. I like to control that in post, which I will show you. Then there's deep output as well, which is awesome. Provided your project needs deeps, that is available for you. And then everything else we'll keep as default. So what I'm going to do is for my final render settings, I usually go to like 512. I find like that is a good amount of samples to kind of use. So just before we render, we are going to add our second light in here. Now, if you have multiple lights and you want to separate that into different AOVs, you would go over here to your image output, and then under AOVs, you have to enable split per LPE tag. So for all of the AOVs that you want, just enable split per LPE tag, and it will separate those for you, provided you go over to your light, and where it says here LPE tag, say set or create, and then let's call this dome light 1, and then here on our sun, because that we're not using the sky component, we can go to the sun, and we can say set or create by the LPE tag, and then let's say sun 1. Cool, so now let's go ahead and render, and it's going to render everything into one image, but it's going to split all of our AOVs into the appropriate channels, and it will do that for every light. So let's let that cook, and I'll see you once it's done. Sweet, so our render has finished, and I have pulled it into Nuke here. One last thing that I did just before was I increased the resolution, so I rendered it out at UHD just to get some extra resolution and details. So this is how it comes in. You'll notice that our HDRI is not visible. That's how I wanted it, because that's how I composite these clouds. And then you'll see in our channels we have all of these different AOVs here. So we have our dome light, we have our sun, and it's broken out into each individual component. So here we have our direct component for our dome light, the direct component for our sun, and then indirect and combined as well. So we've also got a position pass, and then we should also have depth information too. So that's pretty much everything that we wanted. And how great is it that just at the click of a button, you can get these extra passes and AOVs all set up for you. Using Karma has been really nice, especially when it comes to compositing purposes. So now that we have these channels, what do we do with them? Now, I don't expect the majority of you, if not all of you, to not have a license of Nuke, because it is very expensive, and it's like an industry standard in the film industry. But I have an old license that I purchased years ago, and I use Nuke every single day, so it's just second nature to me. So you can do all of this in other programs, but for me, Nuke is just very natural, and that's why I use it. So we have our render. What are we going to do? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our HDRI back. So I'm going to grab our HDRI that we used. I just saved this little preset. This is the HDRI that I used. It's from Polyhaven, and it's just Table Mountain 1. Again, I like this one for look deving clouds. And you'll notice here that we need a camera. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the HDRI, I'm mapping it to a sphere like this. And then we just have a camera which can now look around the scene, pretty much what it's doing in 3D. But now we need a camera, or we need to update this camera. So in order to get our camera out of here, what we need to do is we need to throw down a file cache. We're going to connect it to our camera. Again, we were using camera 2. So I am going to just say explicit. I'm going to say job. And then it will go to the USD file. And then it's going to be called the same name as this. So I'm going to call this Karma Clouds Camera 2. So Karma Clouds version 04 Camera 2. And I'm going to save this as an Olympic, because the version of Nuke that I have does not allow USD. So that should be good. I'm going to save to disk. And if we go back to our camera here and we go grab the file. So in our Houdini folder, there's USD, and then there is Karma Clouds version 4 Camera 2. I'm going to say yes, and there it updated our camera. And now if we look through, we should have the same framing as what we had behind our clouds. So I just need to update my project settings, and because we rendered UHD, I'm going to set this to UHD. And now we can merge our clouds back over the HDRI. So there. Now if we go back here, you can see that our HDRI is in the correct position. And this is what it looks like. So we have our clouds back. But now we need to break things out. So what I'm going to do is throw down a shuffle. And then I'm going to shuffle out the direct component of our dome light. So there's always direct and indirect. You can see that the direct doesn't have a lot of influence. This is basically just the ray that hits the surface of our cloud. And the indirect is really what bounces around. So you'll see that most of the information is in the indirect. Now, I like to keep things quite linear when I composite. So I'm going to take our direct volume, and because light is additive, we need to change our operation to plus. If you're doing this in Photoshop or After Effects or something, I think it's either add. It's usually add or plus, but it's just making sure that the operation, if you look down at plus, it's just a plus B. So we're taking this component and we're plussing it together here. So now the same would go for our sunlight. So I'm going to grab the indirect version of the sun and the direct component of the sun, just like that. We plus them together. So we get the full output, like the full component as it was rendered, the full layer. And now we can plus this together with our dome light. Plus, now we should have the same result, except now we have control over each and every individual layer that comprises our final render. So now this can be really important because you'll notice that the indirect components are a lot noisier than the direct components. So you can start to get a bit more granular with this, and this is essentially how we do it in the industry, and it's common practice for us to just have a lot of control over our renders. And while this isn't necessary to take your renders to the next kind of level in terms of integration and looking more photoreal, this is quite a necessary step, because nothing really comes out of the render engine and then goes straight onto the big screen. We are always editing it in some way to just make it look a little bit nicer. So so now if we take this and we merge over, you'll see what has happened to our cloud. Now, it's in compositing, it's very important to remember your alpha channel. So if we look up here and we view our alpha channel, you'll see it's nice and solid. If we go down here, you'll see that our alpha channel is basically just a luminance map. And look at all that nice detail. It's really great to see. So what we need to do is I need to take a copy node, and I need to copy the alpha, saying I need to take RGBA alpha and copy it into the alpha channel here. So here's the alpha, and now once our alpha is correct, we can do our merge operation and get back to pretty much the same as just doing this and this. So that and that, pretty much the same. Cool. So now we have that broken out. What are we going to do? I'm going to disable our sunlight because this I just did for a test. I just wanted to show you how to split out your AOV into different light components. So you can do that with the LPE tag. And this is pretty much what we want. I usually find everything quite saturated. So I'm just going to pull out some of the saturation. And you can see even just there, it gives it a bit more of a natural kind of feel to it. And then what I usually like to do is I'm going to duplicate this camera. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw down a transform. And then whereabouts do you think we are? I think we're maybe around here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale down our HDRI, because I find the HDRIs, it gets very very big, and if we can actually like scale this down and then we can transform it around, we can start to get just a bit more resolution out of it. It's unfortunate that you know, the section that we're looking at is right by the edge, but I'm just going to transform this down, say let's go 10,000 units, and that's all right. That's not looking too bad. Just going to really get to the edge there, because this will kind of help us once we get to one of the things that I want to show you. So we'll just leave that there for now. Let's tackle some of this noise. So we did 512 samples. We are at 4K, so there really isn't that much noise going on. It looks more like a film grain right now. But in order to tackle that, and how I tackle my noise is I use reduce noise. So it's a neat video plugin. If you go to Google and you type in neat video denoise, it's right over here. And I've got the Nuke plugin, but I think the After Effects version is very affordable. And I find, like, for denoising in post, you know, there are NVIDIA and Intel options, but for all intensive purposes, this does a pretty good job. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it up. I'm going to go down to a section of the bottom of the frame here where I know that there is a fair amount of noise. And now that I have no warnings, I'm just going to say build profile. Gives us 85% quality, which is really good. I'm going to click apply. And you can see that our noise pretty much disappears. But now with any kind of denoise, you can see that we're getting rid of some of our details. So that's not something that we really want to do. So I'm just going to go to adjust filter settings. I'm going to enable adapt to changing noise. This is good for videos. I don't think it will really help here. And then if we go to the spatial tab, you can go to sharpening. And then if we just increase the mid sharpening a bit, I'm going to uncheck artifact removal because we don't have any artifacts that we're wanting to remove. And then let's just press that for now. So another good thing to do, especially if you're in Nuke, is apply this denoise in log space. So I'm going to go log to lin and just copy paste that. You'll see our values go crazy. And that's because we need to say, instead of going from log to lin, we need to go from linear to log space. So we do that, we do our denoise, and then we come back here. And you can see that now that we're in a different space, let me just grab a new section. Let's build our profile. Good quality, that's fine. And there we go. So again, it's still getting rid of a fair amount of details. So in our highs, I don't really want to get rid of all that noise. So this is also a nice thing that we can do, is we can throw down a key mix. And we're going to just merge in this denoise based on the luminance of our image. So what I'm going to do here is, this will target the highs. I'm going to invert this. So I'm only going to apply the denoise to the areas that are shadowed, where a lot of that noise would kind of be coming from. So that does this, which means that we're getting denoise on the bottom here, which is fine. And we're not getting much denoise on the top here. So let's merge that over. So now we've tackled some of that denoise, and let's apply a little bit of gamma so we can darken down these clouds a little bit. Actually, let's apply it here. Keep everything uniform. Apply like that. Now, a little bit of lens effects always does help. So I have this little section here. So I'm just applying a little bit of diffusion to the image. So that we can see up here if I zoom in. So we're just adding a little bit of diffusion here. And I'm doing that by just blurring the image, merging that together, or screening it together. And then I'm just bringing it in at a very low value. So you can increase more diffusion, but you just want a little bit of it. And then some chromatic aberration. This is more of a bit of like a gimmick. I'm kind of cheating it a little bit. It's not based on the lens distortion of our lens, but just a little bit of chromatic aberration does help. And then we'll do like a color correction based on the luminance. So depending on our image, we can kind of mix that in, depending on how much we want. And then our color lookup is basically just like a bit of a gamma curve to get some brightness more in the middle. But I actually like how much detail we're kind of seeing here. And then this area is kind of catching my eye. First and foremost, what we need to do is I'm going to switch the alpha channel here so that we're doing everything below our alpha channel. And then what I'm going to do is do a unpre-multiply and then a pre-multiply, just to make sure that our alpha channel is being treated accordingly. And then I have this little tool that this bright edge is kind of bothering me. It looks a little bit strange. Since we adjusted our HDRI behind, this bright edge is just standing out to me. So I'm just gonna grab this tool, which helps to get rid of bright edges or dark edges. I'm just gonna make some adjustments like that, smooth it out, and then blend it back. And then again, I'm going to key mix this. And then I'm going to throw down a rotor shape because I just want to key mix this little area. There we go. Oh, I may as well do this whole section here. Cool. So we've gotten rid of that kind of distracting area. So we've got this, and now we just need a little bit of grain. I love grain, and it's something that is in all photographs. There's no escaping it. But in Nuke, there's this effery grain, and let me actually just throw down a fresh one. Effery grain, and then I have this preset, which is CG grain, and I'm just applying it in Cineon space. So I think that's kind of what's happening here. Grain amount 2. So grain color space. I find if you apply it in Cineon space, it just gives you a more even kind of profile, which just makes it look a little bit more cinematic. So we don't need too much grain. I'll say maybe 1.5. And there we go. And again, if we had multiple lights, we can kind of bring in some of our sunlight here. If we wanted to make it look extra snazzy, we can maybe gamma up on this indirect. And you can see that just having some extra control, this looks, it's giving some interesting components there. It's definitely gone a bit more stylized, but then we can just take like a rotor shape, and we can say all of this area down here, we don't want this to influence it. So we can just kill that and just give it a nice fall off. And this is pretty much the basic kind of setup. So I'm going to take off the sunlight for now. Again, you can get as creative as you want. One last thing that I wanted to show you is using our depth channel. So if I shuffle out the depth channel, let's grab our depth. And then what I'm going to do is throw down a grade node. And let's see, depth. If I mouse around here, you can see there's a value down here. So our cloud is roughly 90 meters away from our camera. And if I take that to 90, we get a more normalized kind of depth channel. So then I'm just going to throw some gamma on it like this. I'm going to really kind of crunch up these values. And then I'm gonna shuffle our alpha into the red channel, just like this. Okay, and then also we get the depth out of our scanline render as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this so that I have extra control. And then if I look here and I go to the depth channel, if we gain all the way up, we should see something. I'm just going to scale this down to like 1,000. And then what we really need after this scanline render is an expression. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the depth and I'm going to add 1 divided by z. So it basically gives us a true representation of the depth values coming out of here. So we've shuffled out our depth channel, and we're going to use this to haze our environment. Now, what I quickly did was I just grabbed our sphere, I scaled it down quite a lot, and then I'm clamping the depth. So when we merge this over, I'm also merging the depth channel. That way we can shuffle out our depth, and it looks more like this. So we can see our cloud with our environment behind, and then I'm shuffling that out so that we now have this kind of rudimentary haze layer. So now what we can do with that is I'm just going to blur our background. So let's just make it nice and blurry so that we get that color information. And then we can merge this using our depth mat. And you can see that we can now start pushing our cloud kind of like back in space. And we can make it look and feel like quite hazy. And again, because we've done it this way, we can say, I actually only want to influence this amount, this section. So I can use a mask to just make sure that I'm just hazing up this level. And then again, you can kind of tweak it as much as you kind of want. So if you have like a lot of haze in your scene, this is a very good alternative way to do it, because rendering that is going to take a lot of time, and it is going to be probably quite noisy as well. So this is a way that we can start to rebuild our environment haze in a way that we have full control over and won't eat up additional resources when it comes to render time. So, I can see that there's like a bright edge here that we would need to just iron out and fix, but you can see the difference between getting some of that environment haze back in. And then say we wanted to have it everywhere, but then I would probably go in and start to see it gets quite bright here. I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab this section. I'm going to darken it down, and I'll probably pull some saturation out as well. So there, we still get that haze, but it's just not as offensive as it used to be. So hopefully through this process you can see some of the benefits of rendering out your image and doing some adjustments post-render. This is usually how I kind of set things up. Once we have this here, I would usually just use a right node and render out the image. I'm going to play around with it just for a little bit more. You'll see the final result in the thumbnail of this video, and I'm going to leave it there. I really hope that you guys have learned something from this little process. I've been doing it now for a couple of months using Karma to render things, and it's very nice to be able to get great results and not have to leave Houdini. And especially when it comes to rendering out these additional AOVs, Houdini and Karma make it really simple for us. It's very customizable, and it's given us the functionality that we used to have in Houdini when we were rendering with Mantra, but now because of the XPU and GPU functions, it is so nice. So I'm going to leave it there. If you learned something, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all in the next one. Cheers.